January 30th, 1943, Berlin. German Reich. The snow along the Wilhelmstrasse has been trampled into gray slush by marching boots and official cars. Loudspeakers crackle to life across the capital, their wooden housings humming as they warm under electric current. Inside the Reich Broadcasting House, technicians lean over glowing dials and vacuum tubes, making last-minute adjustments. The red on-air light flickers, then steadies. At precisely noon, Reichsmarschall Hermann Göring steps toward the microphone. His uniform is immaculate, medals polished, chest heavy with decorations earned and claimed. Today marks the 10th anniversary of the Nazi seizure of power, and the speech is meant to thunder across Germany and occupied Europe alike. It is meant to remind the people that the Reich is strong, unassailable, victorious. Outside, Berlin breathes easily. It is broad daylight. The Luftwaffe owns the skies, or so everyone has been told. Far away, across the North Sea, 6 aircraft skim low over choppy gray water. Their engines produce a sharp, almost insect-like whine, high-pitched, urgent, nothing like the deep roar of German bombers. Inside one cockpit, a pilot tightens his grip on the control column, eyes flicking between compass and horizon. The aircraft vibrates lightly beneath him, its wooden frame flexing as designed. It is a de Havilland Mosquito. For months, German officials had laughed at this airplane. They had called it Spielzeug, a toy, a foolish British experiment built of plywood, spruce, and glue, at a time when modern air power was supposedly forged from aluminum and steel. Luftwaffe intelligence officers dismissed reports of its speed. Göring himself famously sneered that Britain was so desperate for metal it was reduced to building aircraft like furniture. "Any carpenter can make that," he had said. The laughter echoed through German command halls. But the men in the Mosquito cockpits are not laughing now. The aircraft surge forward at barely rooftop height. Throttles open, engines screaming as they cross the German coastline and race inland. Radar stations detect something, but the contacts are fleeting, fast. Confused with ground clutter, fighter controllers hesitate. No bomber should be moving that quickly. No bomber should be flying that low. In Berlin, Göring's voice swells with confidence. He speaks of destiny, of sacrifice, of enemies crushed and cities reduced. He boasts of the Luftwaffe's might, of how no hostile aircraft can threaten the heart of the Reich. His words pour through the ether, amplified by transmitters that beam Nazi propaganda across Europe. Then, faintly at first, a new sound intrudes, a distant, rising whine. Technicians glance at one another. One steps toward a window. Another adjusts a dial, frowning. The sound grows louder, unmistakable now, cutting through the cold winter air like a blade. Outside, Berliners look up. They see them at the last possible moment. Dark shapes burst over the rooftops, moving impossibly fast. Too fast. Too low. The mosquitoes roar down the streets, wings nearly level with church spires, sunlight flashing off their canopies. Flak guns swing wildly, crews scrambling, shells bursting far too high. Inside the broadcast hall, the floor trembles. Göring pauses mid-sentence. The first bomb strikes. The explosion slams into the building with concussive force, shattering windows and plunging the studio into chaos. Lights flicker violently. Dust and plaster rain from the ceiling. The microphone squeals, then howls with feedback. Across Germany, radios erupt in static. Göring's voice, so carefully prepared, so confidently delivered, is cut off mid-breath. Silence. For several long seconds, there is nothing but dead air. In the cockpit of a Mosquito banking hard away from the target, the navigator looks back and sees smoke billowing from the broadcasting complex. The pilot doesn't smile. He is already lining up for the escape run, pushing the aircraft to its limit, trusting speed and surprise more than armor or guns. Behind them, Berlin's air defenses finally begin to respond, but too late. Fighters scramble. Searchlights stab uselessly at empty sky. The wooden aircraft are already gone, racing back toward the sea, untouched. In the wrecked studio, Engineers scramble to restore power. Göring stands rigid, face flushed, not with rage alone, but with humiliation. The Reichsmarschall of the Luftwaffe, silenced in his own capital, on the most symbolic day of the Nazi calendar. The laughter is over. Somewhere over northern Germany, a Mosquito crew flies home in stunned disbelief, only just beginning to grasp what they have done. February 1943. Berlin Air Ministry. Wendler Block. The doors close hard behind Hermann Göring. Inside the conference room, no one speaks. Maps of Germany hang on the walls. Berlin circled in thick red pencil, like a wound that refuses to clot. An ashtray overflows. Cigarette smoke hangs low, unmoving, as if even the air is afraid. Göring removes his gloves slowly, deliberately, and places them on the table. They flew unopposed, he says at last, his voice tight. Over the capital, in daylight, no one dares meet his eyes. An intelligence officer clears his throat and begins to speak about radar gaps, about altitude profiles, about aircraft performance estimates. But Göring cuts him off with a sharp slap of his palm. Enough excuses. He knows the truth now. They all do. The aircraft that silenced his speech was not a fluke. It was the culmination of an idea the Germans had mocked from the beginning. The Mosquito was born not of desperation, but defiance. Back in 1938, while Europe braced for war, British aircraft designer Geoffrey de Havilland had argued against conventional thinking. Aluminum would be scarce, he warned. Skilled metal workers would be overwhelmed. But Britain had furniture makers, piano builders, cabinet craftsmen. Why not build an aircraft from wood? The Air Ministry scoffed. At first, yet de Havilland persisted, assembling a team that believed speed was the ultimate defense. Strip away heavy gun turrets. Reduce crew to 2. Give the aircraft engines powerful enough to outrun fighters instead of fighting them. The result was an aircraft that looked wrong to traditional eyes. Smooth wooden skin, elegant lines, light, fast, deceptively fragile. The Germans saw intelligence photos and laughed. A bomber without guns, made of plywood. They called it wooden wonder with disdain. Luftwaffe analysts concluded it would burn easily, break apart under stress, and die the moment a Bf-109 caught it. But they had misunderstood everything. Wood absorbed radar differently. The Mosquito's speed exceeded expectations. At altitude, it could outrun nearly every German fighter in service. At low level, it was nearly untouchable, too fast to track, too agile to hit, and January 30th had proven something worse. It could strike symbols. In Berlin, engineers now pick through the wreckage of the Reich broadcasting house, twisted antennae, smashed transmitters, scorched cables. The damage is not catastrophic, but the insult is irreversible. Across Europe, people heard the Reichsmarschall vanish mid-sentence. For a propaganda state built on control of narrative, it was a psychic wound. Meanwhile, back in England, the mood is very different. At RAF bases scattered across eastern Britain, Mosquito crews debrief quietly. They are not allowed to boast. Officially, the raid is described in neutral terms, successful disruption of enemy communications. But among aircrew, the story spreads in murmurs. We knocked Göring off the air. One navigator sketches the approach route on a mess hall napkin. Another remembers how close they flew to church towers, how faces in Berlin's streets looked up in pure disbelief. These men understand something their commanders already know. The Mosquito has changed the rules. Air Vice Marshal Sir Arthur Harris, head of Bomber Command, takes careful note. Harris believes in mass, in firestorms, in crushing Germany under weight of explosives. But even he cannot ignore precision like this. One aircraft, one target, one moment, timed to the second. The Germans feel it too. Luftwaffe fighter units are ordered to adjust tactics. Radar operators are retrained. New altitude bands are monitored. Göring demands answers. And scapegoats. Somewhere, a junior officer pays for the Reichsmarschall's humiliation with his career. But the Mosquito keeps coming. It strikes Gestapo headquarters, power stations, rail hubs, night fighter bases, always fast. always precise. Sometimes with bombs, sometimes with cameras, sometimes with nothing but mockery. Leaflets dropped over cities the Luftwaffe claimed were safe. German pilots curse it. By the time they see it, it's gone. One ace writes in his diary that chasing a mosquito feels like trying to catch a swallow with a horse. Another complains bitterly that the British cheat the air itself. Deep down, the Luftwaffe understands what this means. If Britain can build an aircraft that ignores the rules, and if German defenses cannot stop it, then the Reich's skies are no longer sovereign. And Hermann Göring, once so proud of his air force, now knows the truth he cannot say aloud. He laughed at a wooden airplane, and it laughed back. Over Berlin, spring 1943. RAF Marham, Norfolk, England. Dawn breaks pale and cold over the concrete dispersal bays. Ground crews move with practiced efficiency, breath fogging in the morning air as they pull chocks and check control surfaces. One of them runs a hand along the Mosquito's fuselage, smooth, almost warm to the touch despite the chill. It still doesn't look like a bomber. Squadron leader Percy Pickard stands near the wing root, flight jacket zipped high, listening as his navigator recites headings and timing. Pickard has flown everything the RAF has to offer. He knows weight, drag, stress, and he knows this aircraft is different. Remember, he says calmly, we're not fighting our way in. We're outrunning trouble. Engines cough, then roar to life. The twin Rolls-Royce Merlin engines settle into a sharp, eager growl. The Mosquito begins to taxi, light on its wheels, almost impatient. Across the channel, German defenses are already shifting. New directives circulate through Luftwaffe command. Mosquito threat prioritized. Fighter units are warned not to underestimate speed. Flak crews are ordered to lower their firing solutions, then lower them again. Radar operators strain to separate real targets from noise. It rarely helps. The Mosquito's greatest weapon is not its bombs. It is time. It appears late, strikes fast, and vanishes before the enemy can react. By the time phones ring and orders are shouted, the aircraft is already homeward bound, engines throttled back, crew exchanging glances of disbelief and relief. In April, Mosquitoes hit night fighter airfields in France, destroying German interceptors on the ground. In May, they strike rail junctions with surgical accuracy, bombs walking neatly across tracks like measured footsteps. Each raid chips away not only at infrastructure, but at confidence. German civilians begin to notice. They hear the sirens too late. They see the aircraft too briefly. They whisper about the English wooden plane that no one can stop. In cafes and shelters, the propaganda line frays at the edges. If the Luftwaffe controls the air, why does this keep happening? Inside German command, frustration hardens into fear. Engineers push experimental fighters, higher speed, heavier armament. The FW-190 is modified. The Me-262 jet program gains urgency. Its advocates now armed with a living example of what speed can do to an enemy. Yet none of it comes fast enough. The Mosquito becomes a tool for missions no other aircraft can attempt. Pathfinding, marking targets for bomber streams with flares dropped from precise altitudes. Photographic reconnaissance, flying unarmed deep into the Reich, cameras clicking calmly, while flak bursts uselessly behind it. Intruder missions, hunting German night fighters as they land, catching them vulnerable and low on fuel. Each success deepens the insult begun in Berlin. Goering's anger becomes legend. He rants about British arrogance, about carpenters defeating engineers, about how the Luftwaffe, once the terror of Europe, is being humiliated by an aircraft made of glue and wood. But privately, the truth is undeniable. The Mosquito has forced Germany to defend everything, everywhere, all the time. Resources stretch thin. Fighters are tied to airfield defense instead of the front. Flak batteries are spread wider. Radar crews work longer hours. Fatigue sets in. Mistakes follow, and the Mosquito keeps exploiting them. One German officer later recalls the psychological toll. You never knew where it would strike, only that it would strike where you felt safest. Back at RAF stations, Mosquito crews develop a quiet confidence. They still fear flak. They still respect fighters. But they trust their aircraft. They trust speed. They trust that if they fly it right, nothing can touch them. Before each mission, pilots run a hand over the wooden skin. Not superstition, but gratitude. This strange aircraft, once dismissed as a joke, has become a scalpel in a war of hammers. And in Berlin, every time Goering hears an engine overhead, even a friendly one, he looks up, because he remembers the moment his voice vanished into static, and he knows it could happen again. February 18th, 1944. Amiens, occupied France. The morning is unnaturally clear. Cold air hangs over the countryside, fields glazed with frost. Roads empty, except for the occasional German truck grinding along under gray skies. Inside one low-flying Mosquito, Flight Lieutenant Charles Bill Warburton Lee glances at his stopwatch. His navigator counts down softly, eyes locked on the map. They are seconds from the target. Ahead, the walls of Amiens prison rise from the flat land like a scar. Thick stone. Watchtowers. Barbed wire. Inside those walls are French resistance fighters, scheduled for execution. The mission is desperate, controversial, and unforgiving. If they miss by meters, they kill the men they're trying to save. If they're late, everyone dies. The Mosquitoes descend even lower. Treetops blur past beneath the wings. The aircraft shake violently as pilots fight turbulence created by their own speed. German guards look up in confusion, then terror, as the first bombs hit the prison's outer walls. The explosions are precise, almost surgical. Walls collapse outward. Gates buckle. Power lines snap. A second wave follows immediately, smashing guard barracks and blowing holes through inner walls. Snow and debris erupt into the air. Prisoners scatter, some stunned, some running, some crawling through smoke and rubble toward freedom. German flak opens up wildly, shells bursting far too late, far too high. Within minutes, it's over. The Mosquitoes are gone. Across occupied Europe, the story spreads like wildfire. The British have used the wooden bomber not just to destroy, but to rescue. For many, it becomes proof that the Luftwaffe's grip is slipping, that even under occupation, the Reich is vulnerable. In Berlin, there is no laughter left at all. By now, Göring's earlier mockery has become a bitter curse. He is haunted by the aircraft he dismissed. Reports pile up on his desk. Failed interceptions, destroyed installations, embarrassed commanders. Each one reinforces the same conclusion. The Mosquito cannot be stopped. Not reliably. Not cheaply. Not with what Germany has left. And the irony is unbearable. Germany had its own advanced designs, its own brilliant engineers. But doctrine, pride, and scorn for unorthodox ideas had blinded them. They had dismissed the Mosquito not because it was weak, but because it challenged everything they believed air power was supposed to be. Wood instead of metal, speed instead of armor, precision instead of brute force. By 1944, the Allies are advancing everywhere. The Luftwaffe is bleeding pilots faster than it can train them. Fuel shortages ground aircraft before they ever see combat. And still, the Mosquitoes fly. They mark targets for the bombers that turn German cities into infernos. They sever communications. They disrupt command centers. They haunt the Reich at night and humiliate it by day. The joke is long dead. When the war ends, German officers will speak candidly during interrogations. Many will admit the Mosquito was one of the most effective aircraft of the war, an enemy they respected and feared. Some will say it forced technological leaps that came too late. Others will say it broke something intangible, the belief that German airspace was sacred. And it all traces back to that moment in Berlin, January 30th, 1943. A wooden aircraft screaming out of a winter sky. A broadcast cut to silence. A Reichsmarschall left staring at a dead microphone. The Mosquito had not just knocked a radio station off the air. It had shattered a myth.